We have a special guest on the line, Sip, to start off the 7 o'clock hour. We're joined by Charles Thompson, the father of Husker quarterback Casey Thompson, the former Oklahoma quarterback himself. Good morning, Charles. We'll start off with Casey. Your son just got a master's degree this weekend. What does it feel like to have your son getting a master's degree from the University of Nebraska?
Well, I appreciate you guys having me on. As you know, I now you guys it's called the Sip and Jake. Is that what it's called?
Yeah, you got it. Sip and Jake.
Early break with Sip and Jake, Charles. Early break.
I like that. I like it. Of course, I'm in radio myself and been in it for years and have my own radio show, so I can respect and appreciate the name and how that has a little bit of a ring to it. So it's good job by you both.
Thank you, Charles. We appreciate it.
No, listen. I can tell you that it's beyond words to express how proud I am of Casey and just getting his master's degree. At the University of Nebraska was a great experience for us and our family, and just seeing him walk across that stage and accomplish what he's accomplished academically is to say the least, is a very impressive and very proud day for us and certainly for me.
Did you make it up? Did you make it up to Lincoln for that, Charles?
Yes, I was in Lincoln. I was in Lincoln last week and for take that in person there at the Pinnacle Bank Arena is what they call it.
That's exactly right. That's where they play. That's where the men's team and women's team play basketball. Various events there. Charles Thompson joins us. Charles Thompson, the father of Casey Thompson. And a lot of people, Charles, were wondering if Casey would come back to Nebraska and play another season. And now you told me yesterday Casey's coming back. What went into the decision? What was the decision-making process like of Casey coming back to Nebraska for another year?
Well, I mean, it's, we, to be quite honest, we feel like he felt like, listen, at the end of the day, it's ultimately Casey's decision, Steve and Jake. We as a family, I got my older son who played quarterback at University of Oklahoma and Utah, and then he's gone on to play professionally with the Rams and the Redskins as a wide receiver. And so, we just act as an advisory board to help guide Casey and to be sort of his eyes, ears, and mind sometimes to give his discernment on what he ultimately should do. But ultimately, it's his decision. It wasn't that he wasn't necessarily leaning coming back. He felt like there was things unfinished business. He fought injury all this past year. And just ultimately felt like Nebraska it felt comfortable to him. So I think there's a lot of to do made about it. I mean, he would have liked to certainly, he was an advocate for certainly Coach Joseph, but things change and you have to move forward. Has he done? In moving from Texas to Nebraska, you got to put your big boy britches on and make decisions that you ultimately think's best for yourself.
Charles, I got one other question for you. Well, a few other before Jake chimes in here. Hey, did Nebraska did they re-recruit Casey? Did they make it known to him that they wanted him back?
Well, I mean, obviously it wouldn't be that. I mean, that was certainly a big major question. To be quite honest with you, I mean, we didn't know that, and so. I can tell you that I've met Coach RHULE. I've had conversations with him in person in Lincoln myself, and Casey. So we feel comfortable and heard nothing but a lot of great things. We do. I've got a big network of relationships around the college world. I still coach quarterbacks and do camps all over the country. Have a lot of coaching friends in the college ranks or former college ranks, and we've heard nothing but great things about Coach RHULE and what we think the possibilities and capabilities. Although we only, Casey only has 1 year. Yeah. We feel like he's a good person to lead the program, and we're excited about that.
So by Charles Thompson shows Charles Casey went from the Big 12 in Texas to the Big 10 at Nebraska. Did he tell you kind of the difference between the conferences, the styles of play? What was it? The difference, if anything, between the Big 12 and the Big 10 styles of play?
I think the biggest glaring difference is the Big Ten certainly a group, brute, brunt, and grunt up front type of league. I mean, you got to have the horses up front. Their front sevens are probably more physical, but for the most part, maybe their back end is not as elusive and fast as what you see in the Big 12, which is predicated, I think, more on a passing element game, more spread out. So I think the back end's maybe a little bit faster and more exotic. But I think there's some very talented teams and some very well-coached teams in the Big Ten. So I think that's the major difference.
Joined by Charles Thompson, former Oklahoma quarterback, father of Casey Thompson. Casey Thompson, Nebraska's starting quarterback for 10 games last year. This season, and had really an excellent year. Played through injuries. Now he played through a shoulder issue that he had a procedure done on here recently. How will that affect him this spring and going into the summer, Charles?
Well, I mean, it's a slap tear. And I think Casey talked about it in his last
press
conference, I believe, post game in Iowa. We kind of didn't talk much about it. He didn't talk much about it, neither did the coaching staff. But he had been dealing with it all season, and I thought, it's a testament to him of continuing to go out there each and every Saturday and continue to play. I think, if I remember, the Rutgers game, I believe he came out of the locker room late because he took another shot on there and was having to get it tended to. And so, kid the warrior. I just, I'm impressed by his grit to want to be excellent. Listen, I know that at the end of the day, it's about wins and losses. And I think Nebraska, and you always criticize, no matter what, Steve and Jake. If you don't win, people are going to criticize it, and certainly didn't win to the magnitude that he wanted and the team wanted this past season. So there's a lot of room for criticism. I know fan base wise, if you don't win, you're not any good. So I'm sure there's a mixed emotion about this past season, about his performance. But at the end of the day, as a dad, I was proud of how he went out there, competed, fought through injury, and could have, despite the shoulder injury, had the nerve injury in his elbow and could have actually shut it down the last part of the season. Lot was lost. I think after they lost to Illinois in another game, they weren't bowl eligible. But his grit and his drive and his want to get out there and perform and be there in the battle with his team was a major part of why he wanted to return and try to leave everything on a high note.
Well,
at the end of the season.
I think too, Charles. Look at the Iowa game. He played so well in that game. Nebraska was up 24-0, held on to win, but that's a game there was nothing riding on it for bowl eligibility. They were trying to end a 7-game skid, stop Iowa from winning the West, which they did. Look at that game specifically. If you're Casey and you helped deliver that win, what did that mean to him to cap his first season off at Nebraska with the win against a rival in Iowa?
Well, obviously, winning it after the fact, he talked about how it was a great experience. The fact that he didn't even know, be going into the game, they gave out a trophy for it, So he gave it something at the end of the game, kind of even added on top of that, the icing on the cake. But man, listen, Casey's growing up around football. We are a football family. But you got to think about, what he spent around at 10 years old. He was hanging around locker rooms with Josh Heupel and other coaches, the Stoops at University of Oklahoma, being in throwing balls to Sterling Shepard and guys like that with his brother. And so, he's been around football his whole life. We live, eat, and drinks football, and we're a football family. So Casey loves the game. He loves the sport. He loves competing. He loves preparing, and he loves the process of it. If you see anyone, if you see him around Lincoln, he's either going out to eat somewhere or he's somewhere watching film. Not doing a whole lot other than that.
Charles Thompson joins us, the father of Casey, the Nebraska's starting quarterback this season, and I would guess, I'd say project him to be the starter next season. Casey, how would you say how has Casey characterized the new offense to you, Charles, with Matt RHULE coming in, Marcus Satterfield, the offensive coordinator? Has he indicated to you what this offense could look like?
Well, I've had a chance with him. He got the playbook sent to him, and we looked at it. Listen, here's the funny part about this, guys.
Okay.
There's a lot of speculation as to this is all of a sudden going to turn into a quarterback power zone read, and maybe it will. I don't know.
Yeah.
But if you look at what the tendencies are, if you look back at it, we went back and looked at it. And trust me, we flipped this thing 13 times over. In 100. If you look back at Matt RHULE at Baylor, you look back at Matt RHULE when he had P.J. Walker at Temple. I mean, they weren't necessarily high volume running guys. I mean, they ran the ball some, and I think that there'll be some more RPOs in there. But here's what people fail to realize with Casey. Casey has had 5 head coaches and 5 offensive coordinators.
Whoa.
Jeez.
Whoa.
Jim Beck out of Tom Herman, who was an offensive-minded head coach, obviously Ohio State and all that. Tim Beck, both are now head coaches at other universities now.
Uh-huh.
But they were together at Texas, so he had them. He had Mike Yursich, who's at Penn State. He's had Steve Sarkisian, who's at Texas.
Okay.
He's had Mark Whipple. There's not an offense that he hasn't ran. I mean, to be quite honest with you. I mean, I'll be honest with you. Listen, I'm in the kid's vast dictionary of the offensive schemes is unreal. I think he'll make a great, a coach and offensive coordinator someday. He's got his own playbook that's comprised already of all those different schemes that he's had. So when he looks at Satterfield's and RHULE's playbook that was sent to him, it's the same plays. They may say different names on them. So the learning curve for him, you got to think about it. In 3 years, he's learned 3 different offenses.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
In 2 of those years, he's going out in the short turnaround and played running those offenses.
Yeah.
So he's yet to run a second offense, the same offense for a second year, which I happen to think is where he excels more. If you go back and look at his high school days. But zone read RPOs is what he ran out of high school and early into his Texas career. And so, it was funny, Steve and Jake.
Yeah.
When he came out of high school, I told some people this in Nebraska just recently. Man, when he came out of high school in the first years of Texas, all we heard about was, can he throw the ball well enough to be effective in college?
Okay. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? It's like he's just a runner, this or that.
Right. Right.
Now that all he's done is learn the offense and execute it when asked to run a certain style of offense and for a certain type of OCs, he's going out and been able to transform his game to where he can be a passing quarterback. And now, it's almost funny because most people look at him only as a passing quarterback, which is quite the contrast of what we had when he was late in his high school and early in his college career.
Joined by Charles Thompson, the former Oklahoma quarterback, the father of Casey Thompson, Husker quarterback. I'm curious, Charles, because Casey, of course, is part of a 4-8 team this past year. He's returning for next season. It's going to be his last year as a quarterback. He wants to go out as a winner, but a lot of times you have a new coach, and it takes a little bit to rebuild the program. So if he's back as the starting quarterback next year, I mean, how do you assess an expectation for that year with your son being in this program for now a second year despite a new head coach?
Well, I think first and foremost you got to look at what's there. You got to look at the core of what you have. I think the locker room. When you think about it, guys, when you want to go to battle, you really primarily want to go to battle with people that you at least have some familiarity with.
Right.
I think there's some familiarity with, even though there are some deficiencies, and everybody across the board agrees with that. I think the day and age with the transfer portal, I think those things can be filled easier, quicker than what once was in the old days of how college football was. So you have to feel that the people that are there, want to address those. Listen, here's what we do know. At the end of the day, there's not a player or a coach that wants to go into Saturday thinking they're going to lose.
Right.
So everybody wants to win.
Right.
So you prepare to win. I don't think Matt Rhule is coming in to Nebraska saying, I want to lose next year. No, he's coming in wanting to win. And so I think if everyone is willing and invested in putting their best foot forward to do that, then we think certainly the necessary things that will need to be addressed will be put in place. Obviously there's Casey feels like that, he feels like Nebraska is comfortable to him. He understands the environment there. He understands the fan base, and he understands the expectation, the task that's needed. He's been inside in the locker room with some of those guys, and I think he feels confident that year one can be something different than what year one under Matt Rhule can be somewhat different than his first year. They were very close last year. And I know that people in Nebraska always have heard this lately.
Right.
But, you know, the Illinois game, you know, certainly a game I felt like they could have won. Certainly Casey did that game. There were several other games that they were close to winning them. You know, it's funny because they won the Rutgers game, guys.
Yeah.
And I thought Casey actually played better in the Purdue game that they lost. But it's like this. You guys know this. When you win, people forget about the missteps. When you lose, they remember them all. Give an example. You guys remember. Both games were a difference of 13. I think one game he had 12 incompletes. The other had 13. One he threw for 358. The other almost 290. So I can't remember exactly what it was. But both games, they had 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. The difference is the defense certainly was able to control the Rutgers team a little better. Obviously, they weren't as high potent as Purdue. And the 2 turnovers that he had in those games in Rutgers came in the first half as opposed to the 2 that happened in the second half of Purdue. And that's what people remember most. So when you lose, they pick your part and talk about those things. But listen, I feel like Casey played a heck of a game, and in Purdue, obviously they fell short. And so it's always a game of inches. You know, he understands. He's been in the house with 2 quarterbacks, older brother and a dad. Listen, you're as good as you are if you win, and you suck, unfortunately, when you lose. Everybody does. That's the way it is.
Yeah, to a certain extent. Charles Thompson joins us. Charles, they brought in a transfer. I just announced Sunday that Jeff Sims announced Sunday that he would be transferring into Nebraska to play quarterback from Georgia Tech. How do you guys greet that competition? What's the mindset?
Well, I mean, you know, first Casey was made aware of that there would be a possible addition out of the transfer portal and or high school. You know, listen, in this day and age of college football, we you know, you've got to have a solid quarterback room. You got to have a room that has, you know, I liken it to, you guys know I live in Oklahoma,
right?
And you know, obviously watching the last several years, throughout the years of Lincoln Riley at Oklahoma, they've had 2 deep quarterbacks that go out and win games. This year we saw in Oklahoma the first year that, you know, they obviously Dylan Gable goes down and just don't quite have that. And so I think the luxury of having 2 quality guys in a room is where a program wants to be. So listen, we understand the business and nature of football. I certainly do. And I can understand why they felt the addition, obviously, with staff needed. But I think what people tend to look at, or not misconstrued, is he wasn't necessarily the first quarterback that they brought back to the table. They made sure they have the conversation and made it clear to the case that they wanted him to return as well too.
Good. That's good to hear.
Charles, absolutely wonderful stuff. We appreciate your time this morning. Thanks for taking the time with us, and we will chat with you again down the road.
Appreciate it, guys. Have a good one.
Thank you. Charles Thompson, former Oklahoma quarterback, the father of Casey Thompson, Nebraska quarterback.